On today's episode, we're going to be building the second tier of the chandelier. I'm going to be annealing a prototype of this exact same chandelier design that I built a year before. And we're going to bond the second tier to the first tier. So we're starting out today with a swirl. I start by heating up 2 glass rods and using 1 glass rod as a handle and 1 glass rod as the host rod for the swirl to be made. At this point, the swirl is too heavy to continue using the tweezers, so I change over to a glass handle, called a punty. Now all these punties are cold seal connections, meaning that they're temporary and can be popped off by a simple nudge, tap, or pull at the glass rod. Typically I make 1 to 2 movements, break off the punty, and then reattach so I have another straight aligned handle at all times. I like to use this graphite paddle to close the glass chain links. I'm making sure to heat the glass enough to create a proper seal, but not heating it too much that the glass will actually thicken up in that location. So once multiple chain links are used, 2 punties have to be held within one hand. That's when things begin to get a little tricky. Spinning gets a little more challenging, and making sure you get your adequate connections does as well. I just got this bridge finished up on these swirls, and this swirl right here, it's actually been cracked. It's almost a frosted line, so this unfortunately can't be used anymore.
Alright guys, so this chandelier I'm building is quite tall and quite large in volume, so it's actually too big for the kiln that I have. So I had to contact the local refractory testing facility to see if they had kilns large enough to anneal my chandelier and if they'd be willing to possibly allow me to use it. So they said yeah, I had to come down on the weekend, so we're just going down now and I'm going to show you guys a little look into the facility here, and we're going to anneal this prototype. And hopefully that will give us the information we need to anneal my main chandelier.
I wanted the glass chandelier to be suspended inside the kiln. The reason for hanging is to dissipate heat as evenly as possible. We came up with this tactic of taking 2 glass rods and resting them on the insulating fire brick.
It looks like it's gonna maybe hit the swirl.
Here we're adding a thermocouple that's wired to an external computer. Then we can see what happened during the annealing cycle once it's completed.
Switch that baby on.
Okay.
Go through its paces once you switch it on.
To successfully anneal borosilicate glass, it must be held at 1050 Fahrenheit, 565 Celsius, for 15 minutes before it's slowly cooled off over the next several hours.
So take a value every minute. It'll show you every minute here how much it goes up. That's a good way to track it.
Perfect, yeah.
Once you get up there, right? And you'll see the ramp is nice and steady once it starts going up. And that's what's going to be good about annealing it.
Good
right?
point. We just got to let that anneal overnight. We're going to head back to the studio now, and we'll check up on that tomorrow morning.
Let's get this 4th swirl done through a time lapse, and let's begin building this tier. This aggressive looking flame is an annealing flame, meaning that it's not actually going to melt the glass, it's just going to pre-warm the glass so I can't shock it thermally. reason I'm adding more glass bridging is I have to go back and re-weld the seal at this intersecting point between the two swirled glass rods. Without this bridge, I risk melting and warping the structure. Now that I've finished those welds, I'm able to remove this bridging so that I can begin adding swirls to the second tier. Alright, so I have a little bit of a problem. Well, after all that effort, last night, the second tier broke. I'm guessing it just broke due to stress because it hasn't been annealed yet. So I'm going to try and fix this, but there is a slight chance that it's going to leave a permanent scar, in which case we're going to have to start this thing right from the beginning.
We're going to have this lift here and see how we made out. Oh my god.
I said the same thing. Let it latch, that's it.
So the rod bent.
Yeah.
Barely held on.
Yep. That's because of the warping though, right? But notice this one did just fine with it distributed all the way along, right? Whereas this one on the point only did it sag. See that?
Yeah. Okay, well, that's a successful test because now we know.
It's a very successful.
Good. All right. Oh, she's warped.
Now, did the middle tier warp as well, I think? So,
Wow. Dang. Sounds good. Sounds pretty annealed.
does.
Okay. Wow. Well, there it is. Okay, so not bad. Successful test. The chandelier did warp, so now we know that that method isn't going to be the way we're going to do the final chandelier. So there you can see is the bowed glass.
Alright, so we're going to take a look at the kiln monitor here that's going to show exactly what happened during the annealing cycle. So because the chandelier melted, it's times like this where these kiln monitors come in handy. I'm curious to see if 1050 degrees Fahrenheit was ever exceeded during this annealing cycle. On the left-hand column, we have a detailed report of all the temperatures and times they were reached during this test. Scrolling through and looking for the largest number, it looks like 1045 degrees Fahrenheit was our maximum temperature. My original thought was maybe the kiln had overheated, causing the chandelier to warp. By looking back at the kiln monitor, we now know that 1045 was the maximum temperature reached, which leads me to believe that this chandelier is incapable of being hung and annealed simultaneously.
So, for test number 2, we're going to have to revise and change my planning up here. So I'm thinking maybe using furniture which is refractory like this as the support system opposed to the glass, because I don't think that glass is just going to be efficient enough if it's going to be melting under weight like that. I'd say I'm pretty happy with the result, just in the sense of something was learned today. But now the next step is going to be we might have to anneal another prototype. We actually managed to save tier number 2. Like, we're hours and hours and hours in at this point. My cold seal popped off there, and luckily enough I was able to get that straightened back out.
Now this is a little homemade crane that I built. I needed some type of apparatus that could suspend the first tier over the second tier. I've suspended a Lazy Susan off a 2x4 structure that rolls around on 360-degree spinning wheels. The winch allows for height adjustment of 1/4-inch increments. I had everything set up to weld the first tier to the second tier. Then I decided I wanted one more link to add to each set of chains. I've never added a link to a chain that's been attached to a piece of a chandelier. If I felt like I didn't make an aesthetically pleasing link, I could simply break it off and try again. Now that I've altered the first tier, let's get back to the second tier and finish our bridging. Between these two center swirls is where I'm going to make my connection to the first tier. By adding a bridge between these two swirls, we're creating a secondary anchor point so that the chandelier will not collapse when I go to heat the center of this rod.
Now I know this looks like an absolute disaster of glass. There is a chandelier in there.
It all comes down to this moment. I have to remove all the bridging without stressing, melting, warping, or destroying the chandelier. One false move would put me back tens of hours. It's at this stage where you might want to rush things, but a lot of patience is required. Slowly heating, slowly cooling, to ensure no thermal shock ensues. And as always, thanks so much for tuning in today. Make sure you subscribe and turn on that bell notification so you know when more episodes are premiering. And if this wasn't enough content for you, you can like my Facebook page and follow my Instagram.